Just take a deep breath, breathe in life, breathe out anything that gets in the way of life. Holy One, giver of every good gift, we ask your blessing on this teaching tonight. I pray, first of all, that you keep me in your word, keep me grounded in the truth, that you don't let me exaggerate or put out my personal agenda or anything that would ever get in the way of anybody hearing you. I ask you to open our ears, our eyes, our hearts, our minds, and our wills to a love bigger than us, which is you. When we walk into that voting booth or check off that piece of paper and the people we comment on there for the future of the world, especially of our country, we just sincerely pray that you keep us open-minded, open-hearted, and holding hands with all those who need you the most. Please, God, bless this conversation. Bless our minds. Bless our lips. Bless our hearts. Amen.
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 Okay.
Well, thank you, Father Gary, for starting that off. Hello, everyone. My name is Brian Kelly. I'm the new Director of Advancement for CSC, and I wanted to welcome everyone here. We're very excited to be hosting this event. And just before we start, I wanted to point out a few logistics. I'm going to mute everyone here in a few moments, just so that we can hear Father Gary well. And then I would just ask everyone to put their full name in the on their screen so that we can know who's here and so we can take attendance throughout the event. And then we're also asking everyone to keep their video on for at least the first 10 minutes, just so that we can see each other's face and know that we're with a great community here tonight. Finally, if you have questions throughout the presentation, please send them into the chat box feature, which we should all have access to. You can also send a message privately to Troy Wotek, who is on the call now. So please just go ahead and do that. We're not sure how much time we're going to have for questions at the end, but we'll hopefully have time for a few questions, and we'll try to get as many of them as we can. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and mute everyone and then invite Jerry Daniels to give the introduction.
Brian, can I just make sure, because some people don't know where the chat feature is, so can we just tell them where that is real quick?
Yes.
Yeah, so the chat feature should be at the bottom of your screen. There should be a little quotation box, and underneath it, chat. Please click on that, and then you can send messages to the entire community here, or to everyone here, or you can send one specifically to Troy. And you'll just have to scroll through the list of names to find him. Does that sound good, Troy?
Yep, it's great. Yep.
Cool. All right, I'm gonna mute everyone.
Hey, welcome everybody. This is Jerry Daniels. Mary Fitzgibbons and I and a lot of people that are on this call formed a couple years ago, formed what we call CSC Friends, and part of that was this speaker series. And our intent was to use this as a way to help keep the community glued together. Now, we were doing it in the social hall, and obviously in these times we've had to resort, like everybody else, to Zoom. But this is the third one of these we've done this way, and it's worked out quite well. In addition to keeping everybody, tied together as a community, we hope to give you some subjects of interest that'll make you think. And on these kind of lonely and getting colder COVID isolation nights, it give you something really good to do. Just to give you an idea of some future topics that we're going to be scheduling, we're going to have one on why don't my kids / grandkids go to church? I think that's going to be Father Patrick, and maybe with Father Gary's participation. If those of you that know Father Joe Kemp, probably in the spring before Easter, he's going to talk about forgiveness. And then sometime probably in the spring, late spring, Father Mike Garanzini, a Jesuit, is going to talk to us about Catholic higher education. So we've got some great speakers lined up, and as we get these scheduled, they'll be in Newman notes, and we'll send them out on emails. Tonight's topic, for those of you who watched the debate last night, this couldn't be more timely. Father Gary's going to talk about conscious voting with a Catholic conscience. You know, and I don't know about you, but when I have these discussions with my friends, we get into these great debates over, are there some issues that are supersede all other issues? Are moral issues more important than political, economic issues? Are issues more important than the character of the candidate? And luckily, I know a guy who can answer all those questions and even more, and you know him too, and that's Father Gary. So Father, with no further ado, I'm going to mute, and you've got it. Gary, you're on mute.
Oh, no. Oh.
There we go. Did I got it? Hey, Brian, you're right next to my picture. So if I mute myself or something, just wave to me. That'd be great. Hey, thanks. What I tried to say with the mute on was thank you all for joining us tonight and this chance to hopefully clarify some thinking to develop to become more conscious, which means more aware, as the kids are saying these days, woke, to be more woke, to what it means to vote with a Catholic conscience. So hopefully we'll get into that. I'm going to start with some broad strokes and then hopefully get into some of the issues that we face. The broad strokes are really important background, it seems to me. And I have to say, it's been really good for me to put this talk together because it's been a long time since I got back into some of the theology of the church on this level. It's going to be a little detailed. It might sound a little heady at first, different than homilies. Though I do want to give you a heads up. My homily the week before, 3 days ago, so 10 days ago, was on voting as well, if you want to get more of a spiritual dimension of some of this stuff. Let me begin by saying human beings are political animals. And that makes you guys animals. And you are animals, fierce, I might say. And we are political animals for some very good reasons. Background. Some definitions, and I'll be doing a few definitions. So I really want you to know what the church teaches about these issues, because I really want you to know in a conversation to not just spout off feelings and emotions, those are the same thing, ideas that aren't grounded in something. I want you to be able to testify to some really beautiful principles our church has around social justice issues, which includes voting. And I think it's going to make us more credible to the world. And I actually think these principles make us incredibly credible because they're so beautiful, that I really hope that you can represent the church better in some of the conversations you have around dinner tables. And instead of muting your family on these issues, because nobody wants to hear anybody talk about it, maybe there's a way we can talk civilly. Politics, definition. Whoa, is that supposed to happen? I don't know what the background noise is.
Gary, I'm going to ask you to just pause for 1 second. And Brian, could you make sure that there's not something wrong with the mute? I think there's something wrong with the mute.
I'll remute everyone again. And then Father Gary, if you could just unmute yourself.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Now? Is it better? Whoa, that was good job, Brian. So first of all, definition of politics. It's the work of running the state, a city or a state. Politics is natural to the human being. It arises from our nature, our very nature as a human being. Government is a good and natural thing as well. I know we complain a lot about it, but it is intrinsically good and natural to the human person. Politics is simply the art of pursuing government rightly. So politics is the art of pursuing government rightly. Politics is the work of directing all of our actions of government towards a common good. But it doesn't always work. The murder of Jesus is a perfect example. The greatest sin in human history was precipitated by a political decision. When Pilate asked, "Shall I crucify your king?" they shouted, they voted, "We have no king but Caesar." In this statement, the Jewish leaders put God beneath the state. By saying we have no king but Caesar, the Jewish leaders put God beneath the state, leaving no authority above it to guide it or granting it legitimacy. We have no king but Caesar spells the end of the history of the Old Testament. And as a matter of fact, 40 years later, the temple was destroyed by Caesar. For Christians, the common good is inextricably linked to the duty of standing with the least among us. The common good cannot be measured. The common good cannot be measured by a nation's GDP or the Dow Jones Industrial Average. Rather, it's measured by the condition of the most insignificant and needy person in our society. That is hugely Catholic and huge to how we decide to vote. This affects my stand because I must be ready to resist those who seek to govern for purposes other than the common good. We serve Caesar best by first serving God. And it falls to us to remind people of that by the way we vote. And we remind Caesar, by the way we vote, remind Caesar of his proper role, which is one notch below God, maybe more than that. That is why religion was considered by our founders as public virtue. Public virtue is how the founders considered religion. Religion helps check government, and that's how they noted it. And it reminds a president who she or he who is and is not. So that's one of the values of having a religious background. But the way we vote is going to remind a president who he is and who she is not. Otherwise, we are a country with a big old hole in its chest. The Catholic approach to politics is radically personal. By the way, I want to add here that I'm intertwining a lot of comments by our recent popes, the last three especially. You'll see a lot of Benedict, a lot of John Paul II, and a lot of Pope Francis in this. And some of these will be, and a lot of the catechism's all over it. Sometimes I'll name it, but other times I can give reference to you with an email or whatever if you want to pursue it some more. The Catholic approach to politics is radically personal. It means it's meant to draw you closer to Christ as well as your neighbors. Politics is. The church teaches that we're called to be a part of our nation's political order. We're called to be a part of our nation's political order. And if we fail to pursue that calling, you, my friends, are responsible for the consequences. You cannot go to the sidelines. You cannot complain and whine about the way things are if you've not done anything, which most especially includes voting. But it can include a lot of other things too. The person I vote for will never be perfect, right? There's a lot of ways they will align with the teaching, these principles of our church we're going to talk about tonight. And so I take it on myself to write them near the beginning of their term by saying simply, hey, I voted for you, but please don't take that as a mandate for all of your policies. Some of them go against my grain. Maybe that's where we got the word migraine. Never thought of that. This is a huge statement, my friends, to say that you are responsible for the consequences of your vote or no vote. That's huge to say. Choosing not to vote is another form of voting. So a lot of people opt out of voting because the two possible candidates are not copacetic for them, for religious reasons or other reasons. And we have to know that to not vote is to vote. We have to hear this in real life, that we are responsible for the consequences of our vote or not voting. We have set up this state of affairs. That gives identity and purpose its end to voting. Part of what is specific for us, you guys, us human beings, is our intellect, our mind. We don't just act on instinct. This is one of the things that's intrinsic to our human nature. It makes us human. We don't just react to things and to life. We can think things through. We can think about things and the nature of things and what's moral and what's not. We have a unique ability to choose. We can choose an excellence and excellence beyond our impulses and our whims rather, even our ability to choose beyond what we need, what we want. We can choose beyond what I need and what I want. And this is freedom. This is one of the ways the church defines freedom. There is a middle way, and that's the way of virtue. Virtue is always in the middle between the extremes. We got a lot of things falling on the extremes right now. Virtue's in the middle. To live the life of virtue is what leads to happiness. Aristotle said it first, Aquinas said it also, and our popes have echoed it. The life of virtue leads to happiness. We need to enjoy, to be happy, we need to enjoy material security. We need to have at least enough. We need to be secure from fears of starvation, from violence, and from working to the point of exhaustion. This is in our human nature, and the state, the government, has to honor it and certainly not violate it. Law. The law has become a person, and you know who he is, Jesus. And the law has to be governed by reason. That brings us to natural law. That has to do with the framework revealed through nature into reality itself. And let me be as clear as I can say about this. Love is political. Politics is an expression of love. Politics is for the good of the human person. A good Catholic meddles, as Pope Francis said recently. A good Catholic meddles. He or she writes letters. They do what they need to do to let their voice be heard. Authentic faith always involves a deep desire to change the world for the better. The split between faith and reason, faith and our daily life, as a matter of fact, is an error. Definition, positivism. This is kind of sounds different. I mean, it's a different definition than the way the word sounds, if you're not familiar with it. Positivism is the enemy of natural law. It's a kind of relativism that holds that all human laws are legitimate as a matter of course, that every single law is legitimate as a matter of course. That's positivism. It's the enemy of natural law. They're saying law derives validity from the power of the rulers by the government, which enacts them. That's not true. Without any reference to a transcendent moral authority, that's impossible, a higher power. Now, I'm not saying you have to profess faith to get there, because one of the things we know about natural law is you don't have to have any faith to figure out what's natural to the human person and what's not. We need a reference to a transcendent moral authority, a higher power. Things are good or bad because lawmakers say they are. Whether they are or not is what positive is about. Nazis in Germany exterminated Jews. They made it a law. They made it legitimate, that means. But it's still a grievous offense to natural law. Torture right now in our country is being debated, or recently rather. And that's another example. Torture is not okay, even if it's legal. It's just not. There's a Catholic principle. Whenever I hold my hand up, you know I'm going to say something. This is like Jesus saying, amen, amen, I say to you. There's a Catholic principle that is being violated all over the world, and probably by us as well. The Catholic principle is the end does not justify the means. I can have a good end. I can have a good reason for doing things, but I cannot do injustice along the way to achieve that. The end does not justify the means. It's not okay to lie. It's not okay to deceive to get your candidate elected, or to hide the truth that people have a right to vote, or that they have a right to vote. My generation, and some of you guys are of my generation is still reeling from presidents of both parties who deceived us during Vietnam. It shattered our trust in institutions, and we have yet to recover, we boomers. And from those years, even including millennials and Generation Y, we're still reeling from the inability to trust our institutions, church and state. And lies continue come from the top to deceive us for what, and catch this, for what they think is good reasons. It happened in the church. The hierarchy, as we all know, was guilty of this in the pedophile scandal. that broke out in '02 and continued till, I'm going to say in some ways currently too, but also mostly not, after about 5 years ago. They broke their own principle. They helped craft the principle the bishops did of the end does not justify the means. And they lied to you. They lied to people, covering up what was better because they thought it was better for your faith if you didn't have to deal with it. Some of them were dealing with it in good faith. They were trying to do the right thing, but they hid it from you because they didn't trust you to be able to handle it. That's treating you like kids. That end, the end of you guys being okay in your faith, does not justify the means of lying, ever. You remember that movie, You Can't Handle the Truth? I can't even tell you what the name was, but that echoes in my head all the time. You can't handle the truth. And that's how a lot of leaders think. Presidents, bishops, bosses, you can't handle the truth. Lying never works, my friends. Lying always backfires. Any president who lies should be questioned by his own party first. Republicans and Democrats are both guilty of lies. Back to natural law, and this is still a little background, and then we're going to be able to break into a few more things here. Natural law is something all people of goodwill and sound reason can come to know and understand. Like I said, they don't have to be believers. The foundation of defending the rights of all peoples, Christians have a responsibility to promote the common good. Catechism truth. The good of each individual is necessarily related to the common good. What should we choose to see? What we should choose to seek together? A president or Congress is only a legitimate authority when it seeks the common good, not its own good, not their party's good, according to right reason. We got a brain for a reason. There's a little play on words there. If their laws fail to serve the common good, they can be said to be unjust. If human laws fail to serve the common good, they are unjust, and violence could ensue. We're called to be deeply concerned about our neighbors, concerned enough to have a vested interest based in love in the political efforts of our nation to redress abuses and offer relief. That brings me to, according to the Catechism, patriotism. Patriotism is a good thing. For Christians, it's a right, and as a matter of fact, it's an obligation. It became a dark thing to my generation because of institutions crumbling like they were in my college days. It means showing honor, respect, and affection for our country. But it also means being critical, caring enough to offer constructive criticism. This is the kind of stuff so many of you know, but so often we don't see it in the context of the church's teachings here, even about something as regular as voting. Every community, every nation, every state, every city has its own distinct common good. It's actually on the local level. This will be huge in the things that follow. It's actually on the local level, person-to-person encounters that good is most concretely accomplished and experienced. It is necessary that all participants, according to our position and our role in society, we all have something to do with promoting the common good. This obligation is inherent to the dignity of the human person. We must take an active part in public life in the United States, and that unequivocally means voting. I have said every 2 years, if not every 4 years, every 4 years, if not every 2 years, I still long to hear somebody come into confession and say, "Bless me, Father, I have sinned. I didn't vote in the last election." To not vote, though, as I said, is to vote. And it is possible, according to the teachings of the church, to pick the lesser of two evils. We have to do it often in life, because one way or another, our voting, even if we don't vote, like I said before, sorry, it is okay, therefore, to choose the lesser of two evils with good reason. Lesser, with only two political parties, and that means often just that. They both got a lot of evil in them, a lot of unjust laws, they're gone and far, and we got to be so careful but at the same time, often in life, we have to choose the lesser of two evils. We have to avoid it if at all possible, but it's the truth. John Paul II. John Paul II brings up some really interesting things, what he calls counterfeit patriotism. Counterfeit patriotism. He said two things about it. One is it's unyielding, narrow-minded nationalism that is often exemplified by the phrase, my country, right or wrong. Patriotism does not mean excusing what was done in the name of one's country. We have to name what we've done wrong and not be embarrassed, but grow from it, just like we do in our own individual lives. I do things wrong all the time. And so that's just the truth. It's the antithesis of true patriotism. Another form of patriotism is seeing American dedication to liberty as an affirmation of radical individualism. That was really an evil to St. John Paul II. Radical individualism, that liberty can lead to that and becoming an affirmation of being radically individualistic. It amounts to a legal endorsement and ultimately of licentiousness and sort of a counter-reality life. John Paul II also said, the pursuit of happiness occurs in our pursuit of the common good. He rejects that radical individualism and sends a clear message he was sending this to the American political order, that we in America must reject radical individualism. John Paul II said that. Saint, I'll add for authority. Catholic patriots got to love their country enough to criticize its moral evils, but not in a divisive way. Remember, the end does not justify the means. Protesting is fine. Violence and protesting is a violation and becomes an unjust means to a just end of fixing our world. End does not justify the means. It's being betrayed all over our country, you guys. It was evident all over the place in the debates last night. It's just happening everywhere. And I think it's the most forgotten thing like that. Throughout history, our patriotism, especially as Catholics, has been tested. Can you even imagine being patriotic during the fact of American slavery? How can American Christians live in a country that sustained such an evil institution for so long? The answer is, for us, what we can do when that begins to happen is we can surpass the law, and this is what they were trying to do in those days, the good folks. We're really, really working hard to surpass the law with the way they lived. And work to that end, work to their ends kindly. And just keep protesting, and just keep voting. Just because a law is legal, or a president says it's legal, does not mean it cannot be questioned. That applies to abortion, the death penalty, the immigration laws, all those kinds of things. John Paul II again said, the credibility of the United States will depend more and more on the promotion of genuine culture of life, and then a renewed commitment to building a world in which the weakest and most vulnerable are welcomed and protected. We must protect life. 3 things, he said. We must protect life. We must preserve all that which sustains life. And we have to care for our common home. The challenge to believers is we can't just pick one of those. We have to hold them together. And some of the ways some of the political parties go about trying to do that separate some of these out from each other. And John Paul II said, no, we must protect life. We must preserve that which sustains life. And we have to care for our common home. All are essential. And if one of them is missing, it undoes the others. How can we separate or put at odds the well-being of a child? How can we separate or put at odds the well-being of a child without protecting the climate? If global warming is for real, and it is, without protecting the climate, global warming could eliminate the lives of many, many children in this world. There's interconnection between all the issues. And they are volatile, you guys. They are volatile issues. You know that. I know that. I was scared to do this reflection tonight because I suspect, and perhaps I'm pretty clear about it, that somebody's going to be mad at me for something I said. And that's why I'm glad we have a record on video. So that's why I always video my homilies, so nobody can say I said something I didn't say. Though sometimes what I say is probably not the best either. Hope not, but you never know. But they're valid issues. Shaming and ridiculing people on their attitude on these issues is a violation of the fundamental principle, as the end does not justify the means. To get somebody to go against abortion, it doesn't make it okay for me to shame them or shame them publicly and go off on them and ridicule them. So you can just see how far we are from this Catholic ethos by what's happening on the Twitter universe right now. After I didn't see it, I don't even know how to do it, but you could just, they said on the radio today, what people were responding after the debate last night was just disgusting. People were saying the thing was disgusting, and then they were saying disgusting things about how disgusting the debate was. What the heck? That's not okay to be mean to get your end accomplished. It's not okay. It's not Catholic, and it's a sin. It violates a fundamental principle to shame people. If we remembered that, we could have civil conversations about this, but two more principles. One is the corruption of power. We cannot forget that power corrupts, as they say, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. It is a corrupting thing, power is. We need it, we can work with it, but I say this, you've heard me say it in church, this is my read of the New Testament. Everything Jesus was about the right use of power. Not one over another, but shared power. The whole, I could make a great case for that, I think, the whole of it. The principle, and here's the two words that are really important now, solidarity and subsidiarity. These are big Catholic words in our moral theology. The principle of solidarity means all of humanity together in fraternal charity. To those who subjugate their fellow human beings, it stands as a reminder of our universal equality before God, and as a consequence of this material welfare by the just distribution of goods. Sorry for missing conjunction there or something. It stands as a reminder of our universal equality before God, and it has consequences in the just distribution of goods. Solidarity means working with others for the good of all. This is an effective tool. This is not an endorsement of state interventionism. It stems from two essential truths: that human beings are equal before God, and Jesus came to save every individual human person, not just some. We're called to offer charity to all, regardless of their nation, their ethnicity, their economic background, just as Jesus did. It means that we must never deny essential goods to the poor and the needy, or defraud laborers of their legitimate compensation. Principles that are made clear in the scriptures, but it must never be taken out of context. It ceases to be true solidarity when it's separated from, and here comes the other one, subsidiarity. Subsidiarity holds that most decisions should be made at the level closest to the people, that is, at the local level. This guards against the tendency of the powerful at the top to take charge of all the complex duties and works we owe to one another, starting with our families and our neighbors. Catechism. The teaching of the church is that the principle of subsidiarity, according to which a community of a higher order should not interfere in the internal life of a community of a lower order, depriving the latter of its functions, but rather should support it in case of need, support it, not take over it, support it, and help to coordinate this activity with the activities of the rest of society, always with a view of the common good. Could those two words come up anymore in Catholic teaching? All with a view towards the common good. There's rarely a one-size-fits-all solution to these issues. There's rarely a one-size-fits-all solution that can adequately address the needs of a person. How dare Gary Brown ever put that out there, that everybody should do it this way, or this should be everyone's priority? Subsidiarity asserts the problems are best served at the most local and least centralized competent authority by personal contact. It's just so beautiful, you guys. So beautiful. Encounter, as Pope Francis says it. Solidarity. Subsidiarity, rather. Geez. Subsidiarity. Benedict XVI respects personal dignity by recognizing the person as a subject who is always capable of giving something to others. Wow. Human dignity respects and recognizes the person as a subject who's always capable of giving something to others, making a difference, being generous. Therefore, reciprocity, and this is pretty self-defining, is at the heart of what it means to be a human being. It is the most effective antidote against any notion of an all-encompassing welfare state. Subsidiarity and solidarity. Each acts as a check on the other. Listen one more time to Benedict here regarding this. The benefit of subsidiarity must remain closely linked to the principle of solidarity, and vice versa, since the former without the latter gets way too into social privatizing. But the latter without the former gets way too paternalistic and social assistance that is demeaning to those in need. This is some heavy stuff. Catechism. Neither the state nor any larger society should substitute itself for the initiatives and the responsibility of individuals and smaller associations of people. Benedict XVI, sorry, one last time. Sometime the larger body has to step in when the individuals of smaller groups are unable to accomplish something on their own. The state is a good thing then. The Catechism teaches, because we always form groups that seek a common good. It's just natural to us. However, the Catechism warns that socialization also presents dangers, and excessive interventionism by the state can threaten personal freedom and initiative. Consequences for even charities that we support. Charities that simply give goods to the needy can create dependencies, perpetuate poverty, and contribute to the formation of impoverished areas of cities and regions. On the other hand, charities that encourage reciprocal relationship with those whom they serve have much better outcomes. They're trying to set up give and take contracts with the needy and exchanging needed goods for volunteer work. Like, here's how I'll help you. Now, can you help us do something else for somebody else? Can you, in return for this gift to you, can you volunteer? That would be so Catholic of a thing to say to someone. That they have something to give too, that they can reciprocate. They have dignity, not just as receivers, but they're also subject. I have a little friend whose funeral I was part of not too long ago, and when beggars on the street would ask him for money, he said, I don't have any money, and he certainly didn't. But he said, what you could give me, actually, what I want from you, if I could ask something from you, is I need you to bless me. And so it was so often that the beggar started sobbing. And he would put his all smelly, gnarly hand on my friend's little forehead and give him a blessing. And if that didn't restore his dignity, I don't know what could. Benedict calls this the emancipation of those in need. We must take responsibility for the welfare of our neighbor. We don't want to end up with subjects and subordinates, though, in the task of pursuing the common good. Some things are absolute in politics. Certain principles Catholics cannot oppose. Catholics promoting things that are in direct violation of the inherent dignity of the human person would be a violation. That said, the Church has no binding teachings about political questions that do not hinge on absolute principles. The majority of policy questions are up to each of us and up to our sound judgments. These policy questions are matters of, here's a new definition, or a new word, and it'll fill the rest of this conversation. These policy questions are matters of prudential judgment. It means what it says. That is, it is up to us to apply the moral principles of our faith when we make these decisions. It's up to us to apply the principles of our faith. You guys, and what we're doing tonight We are treating you like adults, the adults you are, the adult Catholics that you are, and the adult citizens that you are. Because in putting out the principles, we're leaving the rest to you. That's what it means. You can make prudential judgments. It's up to us to apply the moral principles of our faith when we make these decisions. The church teaches in the Catechism that there's a law of a person's conscience. And now we're getting to the other word in our title of our talk tonight. There's a law of a person's conscience that is built into every human being, into him or her. It's a voice that's always calling each of us to love and to do what is good and to avoid evil. And it sounds in a person's heart at the right moment. This is the teaching of our church. It is decreed by God that the conscience be the primordial, almost sacrament of our freedom. It's decreed by God. A person's conscience is a person's secret core sanctuary where we are alone with God. Nobody has the right to violate a decision we made in good conscience. Our conscience is formed by natural law and the teachings of the church and our education and the education of the conscience, which is a lifelong task. From the earliest years of our life, the Catechism says. It's a lifelong task. Here you guys are, some of you are maybe in your 70s and 80s, and hopefully tonight you're forming your conscience. I can't applaud you more. And as your priest, I just kind of say thanks. It inspires the hell out of me, literally the hell out of me. My friends, we're being faithful to the Catechism tonight, you and I. Imagine saying that, especially to a bunch of liberals. You are educating your conscience. A well-formed conscience cannot endorse thoroughly unconscionable evils, though. Certain things cannot be accepted based on conscience only. And I got to say, the church is a good guide in many, many ways to all of this. Here, Prudential, there's so many things. I guess we could say, ask the question, this would be my gospel question, I think. In the church, can the church require every Catholic to promote legislation to support what she believes? Can the church require you to promote the teachings of the church, what she believes? And the second gospel question would be, should the church condemn political parties that fail to support moral laws? And the answer in the Catechism and from 3 of our popes is that prudential judgment comes into play here. The free conscience of the individual can inform their political decisions on such questions. But this generous attitude on the part of the church toward individual Catholics, you guys, this is really honoring us as adults. The church might not look like they treat us as adults sometimes, but I'm telling, and there might be individual pastors or bishops that don't, but this is treating us as adults. The generous attitude on the part of the church towards individual Catholics is paralleled in Catholic political thinking more generally. Should the church condemn political parties that fail to support moral laws? This is where prudential judgment comes into play. The free conscience of the individual can inform their political decisions on such questions. At this generous attitude on the part of the church towards individual Catholics is paralleled in Catholic political talk more generally. Oh, sorry, I repeated that sentence. Catholics who have a deep commitment to the faith may be surprised to learn. Catholics who have a deep commitment to the faith may be surprised to learn that there's a strong strain in the tradition of Catholics favoring even the legal toleration of personal vices. This is huge, and here's why. The church has to tolerate legally individual personal vices of people. And that's of all people, not just Catholics. Atheists, Buddhists, Jews. If Catholics are to claim the right to use political means to enact legislation against every vice, if we think we have the prerogative to do that, and this is from the Pope, if Catholics were to claim the right to use political means to enact legislation against every vice, we would forfeit our right to have any authority when others seek to impose their laws favoring their morality on us. Another way to put that is that we would fall into a sort of positivism again, whereby we would be granting the state the right to determine what is good and what is evil for everyone. and the authority to force people to violate their consciences. We would be forcing people to violate their consciences. Now you think of the hot button issues of our day and lay them right next to what you just heard is a teaching of our church, an intense teaching of our church. There's what I just said there about, you know, people deciding the government can decide what's right or wrong for everybody, like that. You see it all over the world. I mean, so many governments of the world do this. They make laws about issues that don't deserve to have the laws, and that there are other people that legitimately disagree with that. And it really is backfiring those countries. They're not flourishing. St. Thomas Aquinas states that many things are permissible to people who are not perfect in virtue. Many things are permissible to people who are not perfect in virtue, which would be tolerable in a virtuous person. Human law is framed for a community of people, the majority of whom are not people of perfect virtue, probably everybody. Aquinas is saying, for you Aquinas scholars, that the purpose of human love is to lead people to virtue, not to make them virtuous. Human law is framed for a community of people, the majority of whom are not perfect, of perfect virtue. Aquinas is saying the purpose of human love is to lead people to that virtue. But he insists that the law must do this, hear this, not suddenly, but gradually. Now that's a real challenge to me when I see a student today, and I might not see that student again for 3 months or whatever. I want to push the river. I want to push the river and get them where I want them to be. That's a violation of church teaching. Sometimes we go too slow, though, on that because it gets in the way. But we must do this affecting the world thing towards virtue, not suddenly, but gradually. I mean, that's all over nature. Virtue must be freely chosen. People can't be coerced into being virtuous. It has to be freely chosen. It cannot be developed by force. We cannot use law as a burden on people who are not virtuous. Whoa, Catholics. Otherwise, the imperfect will be unable to bear the burdens of such laws. Now we're getting to some really significant stuff right here. The imperfect, if we force people towards virtue, the imperfect will be unable to bear the burden of those laws and would break into evils far worse. This is St. Thomas Aquinas. Into evils far worse than that unjust law. The laws will be despised in that case, and those folks would, from contempt, fall into those evils. For sure, we would call evil out for what it is. We should call evil out. Aquinas encourages Catholics to keep in mind even sinful behavior that is legal must be avoided. Human law does not and should not prohibit everything that is forbidden, though. By natural law. St. Augustine said that. And that's the first time I mentioned St. Augustine. He goes back to the 4th century. Human law does not and should not prohibit everything that's forbidden by natural law or by the church. Aquinas wisely suggests that we cannot enact laws simply for what the church teaches is sinful by outlawing all sins through the legal authority of the state. Catholics must approach political action and obey in ways that obey his or her conscience. That includes everything from voting to sharing advocacy materials with friends or choosing a platform or campaign strategy when running for office. Necessary elements that connect our conscience to our actions is the virtue of truth. That's the virtue that disposes us, our minds, to certain true good in every circumstance, and to choose the right means of achieving it. Prudence is what tells us what to do in particular circumstances, and it tells us how to do it, how to do the right thing. That's prudence. And also how to do it in the right way, in the right place, at the right time, with the right people, and for the right reasons. In your everyday decisions, including voting, there are often many equally valid ways for you to go about that duty. There's many equally valid ways to do what you're doing, to vote how you're voting, and for everybody to make those choices. This is where prudence comes in. There are many issues on the ballot that are a matter of prudential judgment. Catholics share responsibility to advocate for the common good of our nation. We Catholics offer the world, especially our nation, valuable insights that should be brought to bear on issues, the issues that I'll be beginning to highlight right now. Our perspective on these are unbelievably remarkable and beautiful. And I fear so many people don't know it, and it falls to us to help get this stuff out there. But when it comes to applying those principles to most particular political issues, we're required to use the same means as everybody else to make the case for the common good in keeping with our consciences. Reason, rhetoric, evidence, clear evidence, facts. In other words, we must be prudential in making our judgments, making every effort to argue reasonably and convincingly and with love. Those issues, my friends, that we're going to start talking about now include just war, guns, poverty, immigration, social justice, the environment, life issues, and finally, religious liberty. But religious liberty not for our sake. And this is hugely important to the way it's being talked about right now. The church teaches, the popes have echoed this, religious liberty has been huge to Benedict and to Francis. And John Paul II actually probably brought it to a surface, to a head. Religious liberty is not about our liberty necessarily, primarily, though that's part of it. It's religious liberty for the sake of others. We need to be working our tail off to make sure other people have the freedom to do what they need to do in faith. Wow, that's different from the way I think I hear it talked about most of the time. And we don't have to do it divisively. Let me remind you of another big scriptural teaching from our church, that the work of Satan is to divide people. Acting in divisive ways, moving towards this election is, according to the Bible, satanic. So take a breath as I get into these divisive issues, if you would. It's 7:53. Brian or Troy, anything we need to know?
No, I think we're in good shape, Father. As people have questions, feel free to put them into the chat feature or send them directly to Troy.
Cool. Yeah, every once in a while I get a ding when Troy or you text each other or something. I think it's a text. So I haven't read any of those because I'm too distractible. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you know how much I love you, and the whole staff of the CSC loves you very, very much. And while you might not get a ton of our time, your presence at the CSC means more to me than I can say. And I have literally over the years fallen in love with you. So now to the hard part. I'm saying all that so you'd be nice to me. Shall we start with guns? Remember what I said, divisiveness is satanic. So the church offers no political platform, but rather provides moral principles rooted in the natural law. The church leaves it up to individual Catholics to apply these principles using in the light of recent and our prudential judgments. A lot of the particular issue stuff is the USCCB, the United States Catholic Bishops Conference in DC, that has put out these teachings for all of us that are summaries of the church's dogmas. So they're very rooted in universal Catholicism and overall 2,000 years. Some are newer, way newer. One of those principles the church brings up front for us, puts on the table for us, is the right to self-defense. That's a principle of our church. The defense of our life in this world is legitimate defense. The church has no definitive teachings for or against the ownership of guns. Many private citizens, therefore, have gun ownership issues with the other side on this. Should they be banned by the state? To what extent should they be banned? We're debating the Constitution all the time about what that amendment said. Should it be banned? Well, whether or not it should be banned are matters of prudential judgment. In other words, you can legitimately, for the right reasons, which is defense, your own defense of your life and the defense of others, especially those who are your own in this world, your kids, you have the right to defend them. Guns are one of the ways to do that. So the rest is left to prudential judgment. And we can learn a lot from what's happening in our society right now that way. So that's the first one, guns. And we're not going to get too far in the weeds on some of these because they're important. Poverty. There are many morally licit policy positions about how best to serve the poor and relieve poverty among our fellow citizens. Catholics of goodwill may disagree on various policy designed to help the poor and needy. Regarding poverty, here is some of the fundamental moral principles the Church provides for making prudential judgments regarding public policy. Number one, all economic activity must be conducted for the sake of the human person made in the image and likeness of God. It is not the human at the service of the economy, ever. The human is not at the service of the economy and cannot be sacrificed on the altar of the economy, ever. It's not enough for us to vote just because it's a good economy. It has to have deeper reasons than that. Now, a good economy helps the poor, hopefully, if it's distributed rightly. But we have to remember, human beings are not meant to serve the economy. The economy is meant to serve human beings. That's the first one. Number two, our fellow human beings, we have to make sure our fellow human beings have the necessities of food, shelter, clothing, healthcare. Regarding poverty, that's just the truth. Human beings have to have the basics. That's kind of what I said 2 Sundays ago in the homily. They have to have enough. They don't have to have a house as big as yours. They don't have to have the steak you're eating tonight. They don't have to have your Mercedes-Benz. But you better the hell make sure there's enough in their bowl so that they have some transportation to get to a hospital, so they have some shelter. This is church teaching. They just have to have the basics. And not having the basics is a fundamental moral principle, and it's immoral to not care about this. Okay, the economic activity must be conducted for the sake of the human person. Like I said, I'm sorry, I'm repeating that part, so my eyes are blurring over. In our efforts to aid the poor, this is the third part. In our efforts to aid the poor, we must not commit injustice like stealing, unjust appropriation of private property by the state. We must not do that. Unjust appropriation of private property by the state. Unjust is an important word there. Or taxation, unjust taxation, unjust forms of taxation. In the Catechism, it says clearly we cannot put the economic code of the state above individual human rights and dignity. That would be communism in our definition. And the Church also condemns any excessive ideological capitalism. All three popes, starting with John Paul II, Benedict, and now Francis, all of them condemned excessive ideological capitalism. All three of them condemned that. Pope Benedict observed that reciprocity, there's that word reciprocity again, the capacity of each of us to give something to others is at the heart of what it means to be human. The state cannot come between us and the desire to help somebody or something specific. And in that manner must also not encourage dependence in the poor in a way that does not empower them and enable them to develop skills and find work for fair wages. Basic necessities are a matter of justice, not charity. And this is going to bring me to a really remarkable aspect of our Catholic faith that I don't know that many of us heard of. A remarkable aspect of our faith. From St. Thomas Aquinas. If a need is so manifest and urgent in its manifestation, that it is evident that the present need must be remedied by whatever means is at hand, then it is lawful for a person to take care of his own need by means of another person's property, by taking it either openly or secretly. Nor is this, properly speaking, theft or robbery. While it is wrong to steal another person's property, it's wrong to refuse to work for that one's needs. It's also wrong by those who have property denied of those who are in desperate need for protection from the elements or whatever. This is a remarkable aspect of our faith, and it needs to be digested. And I'm not going to repeat the whole thing because I want to make sure to try to get time for questions here. But that's unbelievable, remarkable. Our duty as followers of Christ demands that we have a preferential love for the poor. We are called in a special way to love them and to love the poor first. The church speaks unconditionally about fundamental moral principles involved in this, but conditionally in the application of those principles. The church is not going to tell you how to do this. The church just tells you this is the principle. Now you're grown-ups. You can figure out how to do that. We are here entering the realm of prudential judgment. Once again, it requires sincere and careful discernment on our part. A lot of study, going to workshops, sitting in on lectures, picking up a different book than we usually read based on the fundamental moral principles forwarded by the church. So that's poverty. That's all the main things I could pull out of the Catechism, the Teaching of the Popes, and the USCCB. That's a biggie. Immigration. The church affirms the simultaneous truths that people have a right to immigrate, and also that nations can regulate such immigration. Therefore, immigration becomes a matter of preferential judgment. Hope that makes sense. The church affirms that the truth, simple truth, that people have a right to immigrate, and also that nations can regulate immigration. Therefore, immigration is a matter of preferential judgment. You can make up your mind about how that should look, how that balance, how the tension should be held, but we got to hold the tension. A lot of times we'd rush to answers that hurt more people than help. We must remember from Scripture that it is to whom much is given, much is expected. And that is not just about me and you. That's about nations. The nations that have the most are called to step up. To whom much is given, much is expected. The last three popes have all addressed immigration. We are called to welcome the stranger and make for them a safe home, and also have the right to preserve culture and boundaries of our nation. Pope Benedict argues that everyone has the right not to emigrate. In other words, he's saying you shouldn't have to emigrate. Your nation should be fixed enough. You should have the food you need and the safety you need from violence and your daughters being raped. That needs to be fixed. You have the right to not have to emigrate. And if a nation is in so much trouble and such dire straits where its citizens are in trouble, the nations of the world should come for us to try to, from us to them, to try to fix that nation and help them through it so their people don't have to leave their culture and their homes and their families. We hardly ever hear this said. At least I don't hear it said. The nations have got to fix those nations so people don't have to leave. People have a right. This is a Catholic principle. The right. We've also said that we must remember the dangers to immigrants. You and I both know the rapes, the child prostitution that comes out of immigration, the horrible circumstance they live in, the sickness, the lack of care, the separation of families. It's just horrible what they go through. And Francis will not let us not see that. He just put a new sculpture in the quad at the Vatican, whatever they call that quad. I call it the quad. I'm on campus way too much. But he also said we need to remember the dangers migrants have, and we dare not forget that. In the process of migration in the countries that receive them, the evil of hatred, and this is the last thing he said, the evil of hatred towards foreigners is not acceptable. Their fears do not give them the right to hate them. And they're often exploited. All these fears are exploited for political ends. This can lead to xenophobia. We have to ensure that people don't decide to hate immigrants. They offer all the three reasons I just said. These are Catholic principles. Now, how we apply them is again up to us. Okay, that was immigration. Now, I only have one more page. Racial justice. I'm going to diminish this, take this down a bit because it's being so talked about. It's really, really important. So please don't hear in my brevity. And we can come back to it if people need more thorough reaction to it. But we've been talking about it in homilies and everything else and teachings, on great teachings. The church has been really, 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 I'm really proud of the church. I mean, we have our issues on this too, but I'm really proud of us for the teaching we've been doing. And I'm proud of the CSC and those in our staff who have stepped up and taught some of these important things. Racial justice, and it's been so on the table, I think we have some clarity already. The word Catholic means all embracing. The word Catholic means all embracing. And that means people of different color skins than we have. And it means to prioritize those, it means not prioritizing those who have our skin color. We dare not, again, this is the principle of the church, we dare not prioritize those who have our skin color. That's a sin, the church says. All must be given equal opportunity, and maybe at some level, even equal opportunity to your heart. The environment, okay, so that's all I'm gonna say on racial justice now. Again, send something to these questioners if there's anything more about that you wanna hear. The environment, abortion, and then I'll make some summary statements. Environment is undermined by greed. It's in the scriptures, it's all through the teachings of the church. It's the environment versus our greed. Personal greed, national greed. I mean, I'm embarrassed by how unenvironmental I was, how unconscious I was about the environment for so long. One way we can end abortion is to continue to destroy the environment. If you want to end abortion, destroy the environment and ignore the scientific evidence for climate change, because there won't be any more abortions, because there'll be no more babies born. That's one way to end abortion. If this issue, environment, is disconnected, and by the way, you guys, you're going to hear a major, you heard it here first, you're going to hear a major announcement from Pope Francis this Saturday. That's what I was told, at least. If you take an environment and disconnect it from these others, and this is where we get to the issue of preeminence. That's why I put environment with abortion. There'll be no more abortions, like I said. If this becomes disconnected from other of these issues that I've shared with you just now, any of them are all together. The Pope says this will only work if the United States and each nation works with the other nations of the world and takes the lead financially and with a good example. This is about the environment. We need to advocate policies, work with other nations to end this climate debacle that we're seeing played out all around us right now. It takes we must lead by financially and with good example as a nation. So that means we need to look at how we vote when it comes to this, and for the reasons I'll be saying in a little bit. And finally, the life issues that I'm not going to address right now in this, that I can get back to you on or recommend some things, are the other life issues we're not going to go to are euthanasia, capital punishment, and religious liberty. But they all come down to the principles I've just espoused, from substantial to subsidiary and to prudential judgment and all the other ones. So let me go back to abortion then. The last pope and this pope and the American bishops state that any deliberate killing of an innocent human being is a grave objective evil. Our teachings about abortion being wrong go back to the church in the midst of Rome. So you can see how heartfelt this is in our culture, in our tradition. In first century Rome, people who didn't want their children would put them on the outside walls of the city of Rome. And there they would starve to death. It could be because they were incapable of something. It could be because they were girls. It could be whatever. There's so many things I could say about that. But they were put out outside the walls and just left there to die, to be ripped apart by animals, to be taken into prostitution. This is why the church became so huge. We're the fundamental roots of this kind of thing, if you're going to go beyond reason. And that's why it stayed such a huge issue for us. We saw these kids being eaten by animals, kids, because their parents didn't want them. Abortion cannot be an end, the church teaches, or a means to an end. Unborn life must be seen as having the rights of a person, which includes the right to life. This does not come from church law. It comes from human nature. Scientists, philosophers, and some Catholic saints debated whether an embryo is human at conception or becomes human at some other point. You can track that whole history. There are major books written on the different attitudes the church has had through the years and in the gestation of that human being. How do I want to say this? Well, let me come back to that. Nevertheless, when it comes to human life, it's not negotiable. People of goodwill, even though we disagree with them, could decide that embryo becomes human at a different point than fertilization. Nevertheless, when it comes to human life, it's not negotiable, and it is to be the preeminent issue, and this is an important word, preeminent issue of our voting. The bishops debated 4 years ago, and they debated again, and they debated 4 years even before both of those. The language of making it a single issue. Should this be the only issue Catholics should vote on? And that was an early teaching, I guess you could say, though misunderstood on some levels. And so it stayed in Catholic consciousness, so much so that I had an aunt who said to me, Father Gary, am I going to go to hell if I vote for, this was not this election, but another one. And she was so scared. It puts the fear of God in them, and sometimes they don't know how to negotiate unless they've had some good teaching. So where the bishops landed this year, very similar to last election, is that it's not the only, they were clearly saying it's not the only issue, but it's the preeminent issue in our voting. And preeminent means the first of many. Preeminent means the first of many, but not without consideration. In other words, it's what I was trying to say earlier. For sure, I want my vote to help end the need for abortions in this world. I wanted to do that. And the church's way of doing it, believe it or not, you guys, education is working. Abortion has gone down in this country almost every year to the lowest rate, last time I checked, the lowest rate it's ever been. It's gone down under every Democratic president and the last three, except Jimmy Carter, and the last three, under Democratic presidents who are pro-choice, abortion rate has gone down. And so when people have to weigh things, they have to decide, wow, if we drop Roe v. Wade, that means every state's gonna be doing, making their own decisions. And that means that people from Missouri will probably go to Illinois, and it's gonna make hardship on many people, a hardship that unbalances all the rest of these issues. And so we gotta hold all this together. And remember what I said earlier about when we make laws that don't make sense to a Buddhist, they're citizens too. And for sure, I wanna work really hard. I am not dispensed. To call it the preeminent issue means if I vote for Democrat, who, because I'm saying that because they're pro-choice by platform, I have a responsibility to write that person who won and say, hey, I voted for you, but just so you know, it's not a blanket deal. I didn't take all of your causes with me. I want you to know I'm not on board with this, this, and this. And I'll be working against you on those things, even though I voted for you. That has some authority. My friends who are in the legislature have told me, and I hope it's really true. Yeah, that's pretty much, that's pretty much the teaching of the church. Preeminent means the first of many. So you got to hold hands, if you will. I imagine a phalanx of people, and the first one in the group, all of them holding hands with each other, but the first one in an unbroken chain, the first one is pro-life, anti-abortion, because it's so hard. And I know perhaps a lot of you on this call have had an abortion, and my heart is so with you, and we do not judge you, and we will never shame you. You are loved and forgiven. And I want you to know that all those things belong together. And like I said, if the environment over here is so bad, the kids are being born or not being born, you can see the connection, at least in that example. Okay, And remember what I said about religious liberty. It's for the sake of all, not just ourselves. For the sake of all. Okay, is it okay with you guys if I make some summary statements then? Or should I wait until a few questions come in? You guys have been listening so well. Oh my gosh. My eyes are crossing just reading my notes. The one last thing that's extraordinarily important. Americans, when they vote, must take seriously the person running for office, the character of the person running for office, not just the issues involved, but the person. We do not have a parliamentary system here where we just decide on issues. In our democracy, we vote for a man or a woman. We vote for a person. That person's character, the church teaches. The person's character we're voting for, his or her values, competencies, and commitments to difficult values. Their character. We cannot disregard the character of a person. In this case, this year, a man, looking at the character of Donald Trump and Joe Biden. We cannot dismiss their character in our choices and make a prudential judgment accordingly. That will matter more than you know, and accomplishing the rest of the issues facing us. If you don't vote, you're saying you want others to make that decision for you. Remember, when you vote, it will always be an imperfect choice and not clean. If you study the issues, you can stand tall. Even in the midst of your uncertainty, you can stand tall. And remember, the church is in the business of forming consciences, not replacing them. The church is in the business of forming consciences, not replacing them. Vote your conscience. We get the government we deserve, my friends. The Constitution gives us structures that control vice. We need structures that nourish virtue. We need a revolution of love. How do we create a system where people can come alive in small ways? Associations where people are motivated by pure, voluntary, intrinsically motivated service. That's the inner work of democracy. Doing the daily good. That's the work of democracy. Doing the inner work of preparing to vote is really important, and you guys are doing it. People change themselves and then begin to change the world. I'll never forget what I learned about Gandhi. Gandhi gathered a few disciples, 72 disciples around him, and went away to an ashram for 15 years before he did anything. Spread goodness with a little axe. Love is the solid ground we stand on, no matter who is president. We will be well, no matter who is president. We are in a new moment, my friends. The unraveling, or all the reasons going on in the culture, has begun. We can light each other up by doing good. Last statement before the questions. The tugs and pulls that confront Catholic voters are so powerful right now. Both parties want us. I am hearing data every day about how many white Catholics, how many Latino Catholics, how many Catholics are for Trump or against Trump, and for Biden or against Biden. Everybody wants us. The tugs and pulls are incredible. And that makes our choice to vote crucial. And it's also crucial, and what I hope you heard this in this whole thing, it's also crucial that we know what we're doing on November 4th. Go vote. The world depends on it. Thank you. All right, having said all that, I'm gonna say a quick little prayer and send you guys to bed or wherever you're going next. Gosh, Lord, what a privilege it is. Some on the screen submitted their vote today online or on letters. Some of us will be in line on the day of the election. We may not know for weeks afterwards. Help us stand strong in knowing we did the right thing, because that's going to be our peace and our joy. Help us trust that having done our homework, we can stand before you someday, hopefully, and say, thanks, God, for the gift of my reason and a church that taught me so much and the ability to make my own decision with a good conscience. Bless us, Lord. Bless our nation. Bless Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Help them be filled with your wisdom and good judgment. And please let whoever wins be a good leader, a good leader. And help us be kind in the conversations. Amen.
Amen.
Good night.
And I thank you everyone for being here, and thank you, Father Gary, for the great conversation and the great presentation.
You're welcome.
See you all soon.
Bye.